So I'm sorry I did not mute my audio. So I think you may not have heard it or it may not have got recorded. Okay. So now there are two kinds of stress, as we said. This is over. So now we move on to what are the two broad categories of stress moderating factors. Now, what are the two broad categories of stress moderating factors? They are dispositional characteristics of individual, namely personality. So the two broad categories are moderating factors. One is the personality, then locus of control and self-control and characteristics of individuals' social environment, namely social support. There is empirical evidence that both individual dispositional variables and social support moderate the effects of stress and coping strategies. So now we have covered briefly what this unit will be looking into in a very broad way. Now let us move into minute way. Now introduction. Now what do we understand by stress? It is not stress that kills us. It is our reaction to it. So beautifully said by Dr. Hans. I would like to repeat, it is not stress that kills us, it is our reaction to this. Very important to understand what this statement means. See, now you may be having several stress, difficulties, challenges in the environment, but it all depends finally on how you respond to it. That is the magic word, your response to it, your reaction to it. Stress has been considered as the health epidemic of the 21st century by WHO. In today's fast-paced world, stress has become part of everyday life, right? Every day we have stress. When we go to office, in office, on the road, due to the traffic, due to the pressure, work pressure, family pressure, so on and so forth. Modern day world life has become more and more complicated due to a number of factors. It has become so complicated, modern day life, due to like work pressure, technological innovations, intense competitiveness, inflation, unemployment, etc., and etc. Now, what is the effect of this? The effect of this is stress. Severe competition. It increases the stress in each individual. The result is what? Stress pervading every sphere of our lives. So now we can give a very recent example, that is outbreak of corona. See, the COVID-19 has pushed billions of people in existential peril is danger around the globe. This phenomena has literally, uprooted everyone. That much impact is had. So naturally, this has created lots of stress in each one of our life. Now, moving to concept and nature of stress. What is the concept and nature of stress? The term stress can mean worry. Now, let us understand what exactly is stress. How do we look at stress? What exactly is it? Not in an abstract way, but in a real sense. So, stress can mean anxiety, you're very anxious, burden, hardship, nervousness, strain, and tension, and so many others also, which I'm sure you may be having, you may be knowing. Stress means physical or mental tension. Stress is a natural human condition. At one time or another, most people experience stress, right? Sometime or the other, we all experience stress. Now, you go for an interview, you're anxious, there is stress. And then you go for a meeting, then again you have stress. You have so many challenges and anxiety is there in your head. So similarly, there are many kinds of stress, many kinds of stress you have to deal in your daily life. Now, the stress is generally used to describe a variety of negative feelings and reactions that accompany threatening or challenging situations. Stress means negative feelings. You should remember that. Stress means it's a negative feelings. However, all stress reactions are not negative. Stress reactions are different. Reactions are not always negative. Stress is a part of fabric of life. Certain amount of stress is actually necessary for survival. Small amounts of stress may be desired, beneficial, and healthy. Positive stress helps to improve performance and act as a stimulation to cope with challenging situations. So it also provides a sense of urgency and alertness needed for survival when confronting threatening situations. Stress is the wear and tear our bodies experience as we adjust to our continually thinking and emotions. Stress has a different meaning or for different people under different conditions. See, it is not a totally rigid definition for all. It is not generalized. For each person, it differs. What they define as what they feel stressed about. So it is not a universal way. But yes, stress is a negative connotation. Now, definition of stress, it's important that you have to learn the definition of stress because you have to define stress in, in the psychology paper, and then that will fetch you marks. Now, Dr. Hans, one of the leading authorities on the concept of stress, described stress as the rate of all wear and tear caused by life. Please remember to memorize this by heart, this definition. It will be very helpful if you can write it in your answers. Now, he defines stress as the non-specific response of the body to any demand for stimulus. Skinner defined stress as a reaction of a particular individual to a stimulus event. Similarly, in the behavioral science, stress is regarded as perception of threat with resulting anxiety, discomfort, emotional tension, and difficulty in adjustment. So, the behavioral sciences, Skinner belong, they define stress in this manner. Now, generally, stress can be defined as the degrees to which one feels overwhelmed or unable to cope as a result of pressures that are unmanageable. See, you cannot manage, so you get stressed. You are helpless, so you get stressed. So now, as we had discussed earlier, eustress and distress. These are the two different concepts. Eustress is a positive stress which motivates you to work hard, motivates you to do your best. This eustress is derived from the Greek root eu means euphoria or good. Eustress is a term for positive areas. It acts as a motivator for peak performance. Whereas distress stems from the Latin root dis. Always dis means negative. Please remember, disappear. Dis always is used in a negative sense. The prefix of dis to any word, which means dissonance or disagreement. See here again, disagreement. Agreement opposite is disagreement. Distress is a term for negative stress. Distress is a threat to the quality of life. It is when it is when a demand vastly exceeds a person's capabilities. Now, suppose you are capable of doing certain amount of work, but when the expectations are there much beyond your capabilities, then naturally you will be having stress because you are not able to reach those targets. Now, distress is a threat to the quality of life. It is when demand vastly exceeds the person's capability. Stress level is related to performance level. Optimal stress is required for optimal performance. as illustrated in the figure below. What are the characteristics of stress? Let us move on quickly. Characteristics of when we feel stressful, for the following changes occur. What are they? Adrenaline starts pumping, breathing quickens, you feel your breath, you're breathing very fast, heart starts pounding, and then blood pressure increases, blood vessel constrict, blood rushes to the muscles, increased mental alertness. These are the physical symptoms which you can feel when you're under stress. Now, moving on to sources of stress. What are the different sources of stress? They are external and internal. External stressors like physical environment, like lighting, heat, light noise levels, and working conditions. These can create a stressful situation for you. Social interaction like bullying, being rude, major life events, suppose there is a death or loss of job, separation, divorce, etc., etc., and daily hassles like annoyances encountered in daily life. Suppose you're not getting along with your boss, etc. Personality traits. According to personality traits, perfectionists and work alcoholics. These two are the personality traits. Now, work stress. Stress in the workplace include the following. What are they? Long hours and increased demands, being treated unfairly in workplace, no acknowledgement or reward, lack of job security, office politics, see, lots of all, you can just take it for granted. All organizations have, to some level or the other, politics is involved. So if it is of a higher level, definitely you will be under stress if you're not able to handle it right. Then you have role of ambiguity. You don't know what role you are playing, what role the manager is asking you to play. Even then, and then lack of group cohesiveness. Suppose you are a team, you are a member of a team or a group, and that group doesn't cooperate with you, or you're not adapted to that group. That gives you stress, poor working conditions, so on and so forth. Personal stress. Stresses in a personal life can cause issues in our work performance and can have adverse effect on our health and well-being. Personal means like connected to family, connected to self, friends, personal friends, etc. Everyday challenges, as you know very well, the heavy traffic everywhere you go, in whatever city you are, whether it's Bangalore, sorry, whether it is Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Mumbai, the traffic is becoming increasingly more and difficult. Now, luckily, most of us have the abilities to cope with these daily stresses. However, too many of these types of stressors in a day can build up the cause for major issues at work and in a personal life. Career concerns, then personality, life changes. The changes in life changes are said to cause stress in one's personal life. Then you have work-life balance. Suppose you are a mother or father at home, and then boss, employee, spouse, different roles you have to play. And when you're not able to balance all this, then you have stress. Lack of social support. Stressful life events. There are certain stressful life events that can significantly contribute to stress leading to illness. Death of a spouse, divorce, marriage, separation, imprisonment, then death of a close family member, injury, job loss, retirement, so on and so forth. Family stress, as we have already discussed, family stress, it could be anything, in the family, within the family, financial, when the family is going through financial crisis, you have lots of stress, or maybe some member of the family is not well, even then you have stress. When children, young children, they're not well, very small children, to taking care of them, it leads to stress. Then you have community stress. Community stress has been operationally defined as the interaction between neighborhood, context factors, community stressors, and community resources. So within the community, you have stress. These physical and psychological stresses can be exacerbated in low income. When there is low income and ethnic minority communities due to structural limitations and reduced resources. When the communities have reduced resources or the communities are marginalized, then you have community stress. Of course, then moving on to society stress, we have society, we thrive on performance, competition, and perfection, which lead increase omnipresent. Like recently, we underwent this COVID, and then this phenomena disrupted the whole society all over the world. Some common stresses in society are intensified workload to increase productivity gains. Then you have constant research for perfection and competition, a lot of competition, then difficulty in balancing work, personal life, and family life. Then moving on to physiological aspects of stress. Now, as a measure, but it also physical effect on the body. It is important to understand change in the body and physical signs of stress. Though it is a mental, stress is mental, but it has a uh, very deep impact on the physical aspect of of the body. Now, reactions to stress. Now, we have two different kinds of reaction to stress. They are fight or flight response. And the second one is now stress, fight or flight response. And as we have told earlier, the second one is general adaptation syndrome. That we will be explaining in detail. I will be explaining to you in detail. But this flight, it means that so stress is body's way of responding to any kind of demand or threat. When we sense danger, whether it's real or imagined, the body's defenses kick into high gear in a rapid automatic process known as fight or flight reaction to stress response. Now, I'll give you a small example. So suppose you're walking down in the night on the road, then suddenly you see a snake on your path. What do? Immediately, your brain senses snake and flight. You just move back and run away from the scene. This is the immediate response, flight response. That is, you're running away from the situation. Now, next is effects of chronic stress. See, this will lead into chronic illnesses. Effects of chronic means very deep-rooted stress if you have. This will pave the way for very serious illnesses. Today's demanding world, you need to be very careful how to dissolve your stress, how to come out of your stress. And you have different tools like meditation, listening to music, so many are there. You can do that so that you do not become imprisoned in this chronic stress because it leads to chronic illnesses. Now, the fight of flight response, let me discuss this very quickly in a very detailed way. What happens is your pupil dilation of pupil on the left hand side, you can see in this image, dry mouth, you start breathing fast, your heart starts pounding, and then your muscles become tensed, and then your digestion slows down. That is, you can find this, of course, all of us must have experienced your hands, palms become wet with sweat. You start sweating. So this is what happens to the body when you encounter stress. The second one, as we have, as I've told you earlier, the general adaptation syndrome. Now, what is this general adaptation syndrome? As you can see in the diagram, this has been propagated or proposed by Dr. Hans. And he has described it as GAS is a three-stage process that the body goes through when it is exposed to stress. Now, it is vital to find ways to manage it to limit the effects on the body. It's very important for us. Once you understand this, then we should find ways to implement it on our when we experience such kind of situation. Now, first is causes of the process include as we have discussed, life events, some death, something accident, etc., etc. Those three stages are: first is alarm reaction. You're shocked, you're alarmed. Second is resistance. You try to resist it. Third is exhaustion. You resist and gradually you become exhausted. Now, at the alarm reaction stage, a distress signal is sent to the part of the brain called the hypothalamus. A signal is sent, and the hypothalamus enables the release of hormones called glucocorticoids. These trigger the release of adrenaline and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. This is the stress hormone. Then this gives a person a boost of energy. Their heart rate increases and the blood pressure rises. So meanwhile, oxygen levels also go up. These physiological changes are governed by a part of a person's autonomous nervous system called the sympathetic branch. Then the alarm reaction stage moves on to the resistance stage. What is this resistance stage? During the resistance stage, the body to counter the physiological changes during alarm reaction stage. So you're prepared to counteract. So how do you do it? You return to your normal body, your heartbeat reduces, you are become little more relaxed, that alarm shocking stage is over. Then this physical response can lead to a person struggling to concentrate and becoming irritable and unhealthy. During this resistance, when you're resisting this, generally what happens is, since you're struggling with it, you tend to become unstable, irritable, unstable, and unhealthy. Then then it moves on to exhaustion stage, the third level. After an extended period of stress, the body goes into the final stage of GAS, known as the exhaustion stage. At this stage, the body has depleted its energy resources by continually trying but failing to recover from the initial alarm reaction stage. I hope you're getting this. So why this exhaustion, which is tiredness, why does it take place? Because the body is continuously trying to recover from the initial alarm state. So they may experience tiredness, depression, and feeling unable to cope. According to this theory, physiological arousal that begins by being adaptive can lead to disease of adaptation. If a person does not find ways to manage stress level at this stage, mind you, they are at risk of developing stress-related health conditions. I hope it is clear. I hope you have understood. Please go through this once again, then you will have a better understanding. Moving on to indicators of behavior. There is considerable evidence to suggest the effect of stress leading to psychological disorders. Now, yet major substantive questions remain about the conditions which moderate this effect. See, always the man is in such a situation that always it finds ways to get back, retrieve his balanced state. It's always striving, unconsciously also. So what happens is, in this kind of situations, then the conditions which moderate this effect, the man is trying to adapt. The identification of factors which moderate the effects of stress. Moderating the effects of stress is important because it enhances our understanding of the process by which people adapt to stressors. See, there are different processes based on their personalities and the defense mechanism, how they adapt to stresses, which people adapt to stresses. Now, in recent years, research studies have explored many individual differences, variables to explain why some people readily succumb to the effects of stressors, while others appear to be more resilient. So this shows, the research shows that why is that some people they succumb, whereas the other people have a resilience. So in two broad categories of stress moderating factors, dispositional characteristics of individual, namely personality, plays a very big role. Locus of control, where is the focus of the person? Is the person looking that the stresses are inside me, so I can help it, or external, whether it's internal or external? Depending on that, the person will respond. And self-control, of course. If a person has lots of self-control, naturally, he will be more equipped to handle stress situations. Now, characteristics of individuals, social environment, namely social support, all these also play a major role. Now, here, personality types, it has been described that there are two personality types, type A and type B. Type A, TABP, is a behavioral trait referring to how one responds to environmental challenges and threats. So this is type A. Personality is characterized, what is it characterized with? As aggressive, achievement-oriented, dynamic, hard-driving, assertive, fast-paced, impatient, competitive, ambitious, irritated, angry, and hostile. This is of the these individuals always, they like to have control over everything which is external to them. So they are risk takers, rigid and inflexible. Now, whereas type B persons are open to criticism, they try to make others feel accepted and at ease, and so that they are more satisfied with their jobs. They are more easygoing, they are more casual, etc. So depending on that, they have these stressors, modifiers of stressors. The locus of control and coping, as we have already discussed earlier, we have this external and internal. Internal, when internal external locus of control. It refers to, what does it refer to? An individual believes that one has control or do not have control over events in life. People with internal LOC generally believe they are primarily responsible for and in control of what happens to them. Whereas those who are outwardly, externally focused, they think that they have no control on the situations. Situation only dominates them. Now, coping personality and locus of control. Naturally, you can see that if a person feels that I can control myself, my emotion, I have full control and charge over me, then the approach to life, approach to challenges would be very different. Whereas if a person feels the locus of control is external and feels that, oh, situations are beyond me, I'm getting stressed, etc., then the person finds it very difficult to handle the challenges and situation. So one situation after the other, one situation after other will be coming up and this person will be stressed, under stress continuously. Now, as you can see, self-control again plays a very major role in the stress, handling stress. If you are very determined that you can control stress, you have various tools to use so that you're a better person to control stress. You can do meditation, you can do other stuff so that you are well equipped, your mind and emotions are well equipped to handle the daily stress. Social support has been regarded as a strong moderator of stress. However, this effect is not universal. You should remember, though it is regarded as strong moderator, but effect is not universal. It depends on different kinds of society, what kind of supports you may get, you may not get, etc. So, with this, we come to the end of Unit 4, and we will be starting Unit 5 under Block 2. And this is about, say, Block 2, which is stress and illness. We will be moving into effects of stress. Now we will be looking into effects of stress. And broadly, we will be looking into effects of stress under the following heads. Introduction, as usual, we will be having a brief introduction, what it is generally related to. Then we have effects of stress, which is physical effects of stress, then psychological effects of stress on mental health, then of course, behavioral effects of stress. And then we will moving on to stress and illness. How does illness relate to stress? And what is the link between stress and illness? In this link between stress and illness, we have medical illnesses and psychiatric illnesses. Then, of course, the fifth topic would be acute stress versus chronic stress. As we normally do, let us briefly look into the whole unit in a sweeping way. Now, effects of stress. Now, humanity is in the grip of imbalance due to scares of death. Humans are scared of death, right? Colossal investments are being world. Stress is a natural physical and mental reaction to life experiences. Maintenance of life is critically dependent on keeping our internal milieu constant in the face of changing environment, which is called homeostasis. So I'll use the term stress to represent the effects of any event that seriously threatens this homeostasis. Now, the three major effects of stress are, what are the three major effects of stress? On physical level, on psychological level, and on behavior. The systems of the body affected by stress are musculoskeletal system, respiratory system, cardiovascular system, endocrine system, gastrointestinal system, central nervous system, immune system, sexuality, and reproductive system. Mind you, this stress also has an effect on sexuality and reproductive system. Behavioral effects of stress are low productivity. Now, coming to behavioral effects. What are the behavioral effects of stress? Low productivity, decreased work performance, tendency to remain absent from work, interpersonal conflicts, and it will make you don't feel like talking to people, you don't feel like socializing, you feel like moving away from people. These are all behavioral effects of stress. Major health, then lack of motivation or focus. You're not motivated to do any work, and then your focus is also reduced, irritability and aggression. These are elements which will happen within you when you are stressed too much. Major health conditions caused by stress are weight gain, slow healing, heart disease, back, neck, and shoulder pain, ulcers, and other stomach problems, depression, stress, and the immune system. If stress persists after the initial fight or flight reaction, the body's reaction enters a second stage. And during this stage, the activity, if the sympathetic nervous system declines and adrenaline secretion is lessened, but corticosteroid secretion continues at above normal levels. Finally, if stress continues and the body is unable to cope, there is likely to be a breakdown of bodily resources, causing medical and psychiatric illness. So I hope you have understood what all we will be discussing today. It's very interesting to see that this is capturing all the elements where stress is created. Now, introduction. Now, let us move into life is full of stress. As we have discussed, stress has become a part of our lives and we must all learn to deal with it. Now, today, like COVID is a very good example, which has created a lot of stress in all over the world. Now, actually, the actual perceived threat to an organism is referred to as stressor. What do we understand by stressor? Stressor is the actual perceived threat. It is a threat to an organism. This is referred to as stressor. What are the effects of stress? Stress has become one of the serious health concerns around the globe. Stress is proven to have detrimental effects on physical and mental health. Stress has a negative effect upon our sense of well being and is a significant risk factor for several diseases. Now, there are three perspectives regarding stress. They are environmental stress, psychological or emotional stress, and biological stress. Please remember these three different perspectives of stress. They are emotional, psychological, and biological. Now, the environmental stress perspective, these are all perspectives. We are all trying to understand what are the perspectives of this stress. Now, psychological stress perspective emphasizes people's subjective evaluation of their ability to cope with demands presented to them by certain situations and experiences. Now, whereas biological stress perspective emphasizes the function of certain physiological systems in the body that are regulated by both psychologically and physically demanding conditions. Now, stress is a process in which environmental demands strain an organism's adaptive capacity, resulting in both psychological demands as well as biological changes that could place at risk for illness. As you can see in this diagram, it's very well depicted body, mind, emotions, and behavior. So, what happens to the body? How does the mind operate? What are the emotions? Emotions like loss of confidence. You become more fussy, irritable. You're very anxious. You're depressed. And then behavior. How does this come out as a behavior? Smoking. You tend to smoke more. There is a restlessness. You develop an insomnia, and then loss of appetite, etc. As we have discussed, it is physical effects of stress. Musculoskeletal system, respiratory system gets affected, cardiovascular system, endocrine system, gastrointestinal system, central nervous system, immune system, sexuality, and reproductive system. What are the psychological effects of stress? As I just now told you, psyche is the human faculty of thought, judgment, and emotion. The mental life, including both conscious and unconscious processes, the mind in its totality. Now, psychological stress affects thought. Now, when you have in psychological stress, what happens? What does it affect? It affects the thought, emotion, and judgment also, mind you. Your judgment gets very, very skewed. You don't have the proper faculty to judge. Now, stress cause emotions, all types of emotion, negative feeling, difficult to control, bursting out suddenly, etc. Thoughts is when the thoughts can become negative. You may find, all negative surrounding you. You feel very, very disappointed, etc. Judgment is emotion, thoughts, and judgment influence our actions or behavior. Now, what are the effects of stress on mental health? As we have been discussing, the chronic stress can lead to mood disorders such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorders, thought disorders, personality changes, and problem behaviors. All these, you can develop all these because of high level of stress, mental stress. Now, stress and depression, as we have discussed, stress causes depression, and along with that, you have this restlessness, agitation, anxiety, hopelessness, and then You also have a helpless tendency leading to suicide. Now, quickly, let us go through stress and bipolar disorder. People with bipolar disorder cycle between manic and depressed mood states over the course of days, weeks, or months. So, this mood cycling disrupts everyday functioning, affecting energy level, activity level, judgment, and behavior. Now, moving on to stress and anxiety disorder. Anxiety or dread feelings that persist for an extended period of time, which cause people to worry excessively for little things. Also, they start worrying about forthcoming events or what is going to happen, post-traumatic stress disorder or panic disorder. This is comes under these heads. Now, stress in cognitive functioning, stress hormone in the body may alter the operation and structure of some aspects of the nervous system. More specifically, stress hormones may decrease the functioning of neurons, brain cells. What happens? The stress hormone, they may decrease the functioning of the neurons in the brain cells. In a region of the brain known as the hippocampus and in the frontal lobes, the part of the brain that is necessary for paying attention. So this gets little by little disrupted and the functioning level reduces, filtering out irrelevant information. See, generally we filter out irrelevant information and only store the relevant information. But when such things take place in the brain, then become difficult to pay attention, to filter out irrelevant information and using judgment to solve problems. It becomes difficult to use judgment to solve problems. People who are chronically stressed may experience confusion, difficulty concentrating, trouble learning new information. They find it difficult to learn new information because of this, and they have problems with decision making. So all these is because of this severe level of stress which is there within them. And the helplessness to cope with stress. The body is very helpless, is not able to cope with this stress. Now, stress and personality changes, as we have seen, because of stress, the personality also changes. The behavior effects of changes, behavior also changes with the stress effects. Now, moving on to change in social behaviors, as we have seen, the person becomes very irritable, is not able to socialize, tries to isolate himself, herself, and is less likely to be among people. Sexual behaviors also undergo a change due to this impact of stress. Now, behavioral effects of stress can be understood as low productivity, decreased work performance, tendency to remain absent from work. See, when there is no motivation to work, when the person is not able to focus, not able to do work, so what will the person naturally do? Will not be interested to go for work, will try to remain absent from work. Then there will be interpersonal conflicts, tendency to remain isolated, then sudden change in habits like eating and clothing. Then poor eye contact while talking, smoking, alcoholism, drug, etc., so on and so forth. Stress and illness. With too much of stress, chronic illness is bound to develop. And recent findings by Cohen revealed a link as to how stress stop operators at the biological level, causing a wide range of diseases, mainly heart diseases, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of disability, even early death. So then moving on now, link between stress and illness. What are the medical illnesses? The critical factor associated with stress is its chronic effect over time. Chronic stressors include daily hassles, frustration of traffic jams, work overload, financial difficulties, marital arguments, or family problems. For example, the pent-up anger we hold inside ourselves toward a person or a situation, or the guilt and resentment we hold toward others and ourselves, all produce the same effect on the hypothalamus. Instead of discharging this stress, however, we hold it inside where its effects become cumulative. Now, research studies, it will be very interesting to understand that research studies show that almost every system in the body can be influenced by chronic stress. I hope you understand this. So, when chronic stress goes unreleased, it suppresses the body's immune system and ultimately manifests as illness. So I hope it is clear. Then, of course, apart from the physical illnesses, which we are at risk to develop, we do have psychiatric illnesses also. And that is the most common long-term psychological effects of stress are given below. They are anxiety, restlessness, apprehension, lack of motivation or focus, irritability or anger, and then depression. Now, moving on to acute stress versus chronic stress. Acute stress is a short-term stress. Chronic stress is a long-term stress. Please try to understand these two type of stresses. One is short-term and the other is long-term. Examples of acute stress would be any stress one suffers from a shock for a short period. Like suppose you're going on a car and then there is heavy traffic jam, or an argument with your spouse, or criticism from your boss. So these are very, very temporary unless you make it into hold a grudge within you. So now chronic stress is a stress resulting from repeated exposure. Now what is chronic? It is a repeated exposure to situations that lead to the release of stress hormones. This type of stress can cause wear and tear of mind and body. Please remember this type of stress. What is this type? Chronic stress causes the wear and tear of the mind and body. So, human body is now chronic stress brings us close to the edge, of a cliff, and our predispositions can push us over. It is a bulldozer effect. Human body is good at handling episodes of acute stress. We are designed to recover quickly from short-term stress, that is resilience. We all have certain kind of resilience in us, and that helps us to overcome this acute stress. Over time, chronic stress gradually increases resting heart rate, increasing heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate, and levels of muscle tension. So the body has to work even harder when it is at rest to keep functioning normally, which can eventually lead to a host of health problems, including high blood pressure, heart disease, chronic pain, and depression. With this, we come to the conclusion of Unit 5 in Block 2. Now we will move on to in Block 2, Unit 6, which is coping with stress. Now, we will be understanding coping with stress under different heads. Now, what are they? Their introduction. First, we will be looking into introduction, the nature of coping mechanisms. All of us, we have certain coping mechanisms. So we will be understanding in detail what this means. Then types of coping. Then we have what are the different types of coping, ways of coping. In ways of coping, we have approaches, like we have approach A, which is avoidance coping model. You avoid the situation. Appraisal focused strategies. Then you have emotion focused strategies, problem focused strategy, solution focused strategies. All these strategies we will be understanding under ways of coping in a detailed manner. Then we have measuring coping. How do we measure the coping mechanism that we are doing? Moving on from there, we have perspectives of coping. And under this, we will be understanding cope inventory, COPE, and then ways of coping questionnaire. So let us move on quickly to understand briefly what this unit contains. Coping with stress are effective efforts an individual makes to master, reduce, or adapt to the demands created by stress. I hope you understand this. So it is an effective effort by the individual to do what? To master, reduce, or adapt to the demands created by stress. Now you have a stressful situation. Okay. So let us assume you have a stressful situation. And then how will you cope with it? Will you master the situation, or will you reduce or adapt to the demands created by the stress? Generally, coping refers to adaptive or constructive coping strategies which reduces the stress, while maladaptive coping increases stress. There are various coping models which people use to cope with stress in their lives. One is transactional model of stress, and coping includes primary, secondary, and reappraisal components to deal with stress. We will be looking into all these concepts in a detailed manner as we progress. Now, approach avoidance coping model. We'll be looking into different models also, which I'm sure it will help you in applying into your daily lives, depending on your personality traits. Now, approach avoidance coping model is based on cognitive and emotional coping activity oriented either towards or away from the threat. Next, there is a cyclical alternation between encounter and retreat, where encounter is cognitive and emotional approach to the stressor, and retreat is avoidance of the trauma. Both you do, it's a blend of both. Now, moving on, other ways of coping include biofeedback, meditation, physical exercise, and social support. Social support helps a lot for coping stress for different individuals. There are three types of coping strategies, namely, as I already told you, appraisal-focused coping, emotion-focused coping, and problem-focused coping strategies. Coping assessments aim to measure how individuals manage stress. Measurement of coping can be divided into two categories, namely trait coping measures and state coping measures. We will discuss these two coping measures once we get into the details of this unit. Now, the two most popular and widely used coping assessment. Now, moving on to assessments. How do we assess whether we are actually coping with the challenges with the stress? One is COPE, which is inventory and ways of coping questionnaire. There is a questionnaire. Then prevention by resilience building and future-oriented proactive coping are the best ways of dealing with stress. I hope all of you are with me till here. So now we will be moving into the details of this unit. Now, as we see introduction, stress is an integrated part of our life. Everyone experiences stress at some time or the other. Now, stress, what is stress? It is a reaction to a situation where a person feels threatened or anxious. Please understand that stress is a reaction. It is a reaction or response to a situation where a person feels threatened or anxious. Stress occurs when a person feels overwhelmed and unable to cope with life's demands. Now, there are, however, nature of coping processes and how to assess them are issues of concern. Stress is bound to happen for all of us. From morning till night, we go to sleep. There are different kinds of stress, different kind of challenges that we face in day-to-day world also. It all depends on how we look at it, how we perceive it, how we respond or react to it. Now, coping, the term coping generally refers to adaptive or constructive coping strategies to reduce stress. Now, nature of coping. Now, let us move to what is the nature of coping. Coping with stress is the process by which a person consciously, mind you, consciously attempts. This is not an unconscious process. This is a conscious process which a person consciously attempts to either master, minimize, or tolerate stressors and problems in life. Coping occurs in the context of life changes that are perceived to be stressful. Coping involves adjusting to or tolerating negative events or realities in life while attempting to maintain emotional equilibrium. It's very, very important that you maintain your emotional equilibrium and positive self-image. So coping with stress is an adaptive response to demands. Mind you, you have to use these words. Please remember to use these technical words when you're writing these answers, because only then you will be getting good marks in your exam. So as a layman, we can have different terms, terminology, but since you are in the psychology, you have to use these kind of terms in the answer sheets. So coping involves adjusting to or tolerating negative events or realities of life. Now, these demands can consist of micro events such as daily hassle or critical life events such as divorce or loss of a loved person and chronic strain at work. Now, definition, this has been defined very widely by different thinkers, critical thinkers. So one such Faulkner analysis defined coping as constantly changing cognitive and behavioral efforts to manage specific external and internal demands that are appraised as taxing. See, when you're answering a question, you have to define, at least you have to give 2 to 3 definitions of the concept. Now, coping mediates between antecedent stressful events and distressing consequences. Now, what do you understand by mediates? Means it's like between these two. Antecedent means what happens before the stressful events, and consequences, what will happen after the event has taken place. Coping strategies are psychological patterns that individuals use to manage thoughts, feelings, and actions encountered during various stressful situations. Now, coping styles is influenced by attributional style encompassing perceived sources of stress, locus of control, optimistic or pessimistic. See, if you have an optimistic outlook, you will be coping stress in one way. Whereas if you have a pessimistic outlook, definitely you will be looking at stress in a totally different manner. Now, I'll give you a small example. Now, suppose you take a half full glass of water and you keep it on the table, and then you ask your students, can you please describe this? So some will say the glass is half full, and some will say the glass is half empty. So what do you understand by this? The person who looks at it as half full is a positive, optimistic perceiver, perception he has. Whereas the person who looks at it as half empty has totally a different perception. I hope you have understood this. Now, moving on to coping styles. A coping style is a typical manner of confronting a stressful situation and dealing with it. This is what we call it as a style. Each person has a different style. Now, there are 3 basic coping styles. Now, what are they? Task-oriented, emotion-oriented, and avoidance-oriented. I hope you understand by the term itself says avoidance. They don't go ahead. They don't do. Move away from that. It's a coping mechanism. Now, task-oriented coping consists of efforts aimed at solving the problem, right? You solve the problem and then the stress is gone. That is how you cope with it. Second is emotion oriented. Coping involves emotion reaction. You react to it in an emotional way. Then avoidance oriented coping involves activities and cognitions aimed at avoiding a stressful situation. This is not a very good coping mechanism, good coping style. You avoid means you don't do it, which will harm you. Now, in coping mechanism, what are the difference? What is the difference between coping mechanism and defense mechanism? See, you should be very careful when you understand these two terms, coping mechanism and defense mechanism. Coping mechanism are conscious and purposeful. Okay, you're purposely, consciously making an effort. You are aware of the situation. You are aware of the stress, and you are trying to handle the stress in a very conscious manner. Now, whereas defense mechanism mostly occur at an unconscious level, and people are generally unaware that they are using them. So coping defense mechanism, I can give you a small example where all of us we face, in the family life. Suppose the person is having a very bad time at office and then absolutely very bad time, and then he comes home and he laughs at his wife, husband, and the children and all. So unknowingly he's doing it. This is the coping defense mechanism. He's not aware of that. So he's transferring his frustration to someone else, something else. This is called different, one of the defense mechanism which we study in psychology on a coping style. Now, they are using them. As I told you, different mechanisms can change a person's internal psychological state. As we said, types of coping styles can be active or avoidant. Active, you just face the situation and you do it, or you avoid, to move away from the situation. Active coping involves an awareness of the stressor and conscious efforts to reduce the stress. Coping can be reactive coping. That is, you react. You don't see, you should understand between these two, reacting and responding. Reacting normally happens just in a quick way. You react without understanding. It's an emotional reaction to the situation. Where responding is always thought out. You think about the situation, you look at the situation, and respond to the situation. So there is a difference between reaction to a situation and responding to a situation. Now, moving on, adaptive coping techniques. What are the different adaptive coping techniques? Now, support. You seek support. Like you talk about the stressful event with a supportive person. You talk about with the person, then you become a little better. And then you're well equipped to manage stress. Problem solving, you identify the problem, you share the problem with any of your friends or family members, and then you understand and then you cope with it. Now you should understand also this, that the stress, causing stress and developing some potential solution for effectively managing it. Now, maladaptive coping. Maladaptive coping will reduce symptoms while maintaining and strengthening the disorder. Maladaptive means you do not do it in the correct way. Then it becomes maladaptive technique. Then you have, what are the maladaptive techniques a person can take up while coping stress? It is that this, actually, let me tell you this, maladaptive coping tricks may work in a short term, but for a long-term period, it doesn't work. Now, what are the maladaptive coping techniques? Escape. You just escape from the situation, avoid. And then from the anxiety-provoking situation. You avoid that anxiety-provoking situation. And then you have the unhealthy self-soothing. Self-soothing we all do, right? It's an unhealthy way of doing. Like examples are overeating. You overeat. You binge drinking or excessive use of internet. Or you're always hooked on to your mobile, looking here, doing that. and then all that stuff, playing video games, all these are very unhealthy self-soothing mechanisms. It's better that you come out of it, the earlier, the better. Then, of course, you have the serious one, self-harm. You engage in self-harming behaviors to cope with extreme trauma. So please be very, very careful when you're understanding these coping mechanisms, different mechanisms of stress. Now, ways of coping. What are the ways of coping? There are many ways that people try to cope with feelings of stress in their lives. The truth is, we all deal with stress in our own ways. We are all unique in the battle with stress. In reality, people adopt multiple coping strategies simultaneously. Look, now only one kind may not help. Now, suppose I want to, uh, okay, suppose I have a stressful situation and then I feel I need to understand that and then I would like to handle it, I would like to come out of it. Then what I can do is I can sit silently for some time, understanding the situation, or I can go out for a walk, or I can listen to meditation, or I can do exercise, something which you feel it will help me. So approach and an approach avoidance. Now, in reality, as I've been telling, now it is not a single coping strategy. We can adopt multiple coping strategies simultaneously. This is not only one I'm using. I'm using multiple strategy. And then you look and see whether it's helping you or not during challenging times. So now one is called approaches avoidance coping model. This model says that the central concepts of coping with stress, namely approach and avoidance. That means you approach the stressing thing and then you resolve it or you avoid it, you escape from it. Approach and avoidance refer to cognitive and emotional activity that is oriented towards either towards or away from stress. Now, moving on to appraisal-focused coping strategy. What do you understand by appraisal? Appraisal means you appraise it, you examine it, you critically examine and appraise it. Appraisal-focused coping strategies occur when people modify their ways of thinking by denial of problem or distancing oneself from the stressor. People may alter their thinking by changing their goals and values. Appraisal-focused coping strategies involve reappraising and challenging our assumptions. When we respond to any stressful event, we assume and believe that we are responding to the plain reality. Unfortunately, it is not true. The truth is that we are really responding to our interpretation of the experience, which can be very different from the reality. Mind you, something is the reality, our perception is very different. That can also happen. Hence, it is essential to challenge the assumptions as we first view the stressful event. We should be very, very mindful about the situation, so that we get the correct perception of the situation, stressful event. Now, emotion-focused coping strategies, as we know already, it means that to elevate distress by minimizing, reducing, or preventing the emotional components of a stressor. Emotion-focused coping is oriented toward managing emotions that accompany the perception of stress, managing your emotions that is accompanying the components of stressor. The perception of stress. It aids, means it helps in becoming less emotionally reactive to the stressor. What are they? These include coping strategies like maintaining a sense of humor. Mind you, sense of humor, I totally agree with this because when you laugh, the stress reduces. The body also becomes more functional, which is why if you have seen, there are many clubs, especially in Mumbai or Hyderabad, where they call it as laughing club. So These modern science is giving lot of attention and focus on this laughter. Loud, you laugh, and then you will realize it on your own that how you're de-stressing yourself. There are laughing clubs where all people surround and form circles and all. When they just laugh, ha 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 ha, they laugh. So then later on, if they do this for 5, 10 minutes, they feel that the body is much more composed. So this is a very, very big emotion, which is laughter. Now, maintaining a sense of humor, optimism, all the others, so on and so. Now, emotion focused coping techniques are stress relief are journaling, reframing, cognitive distortion, and meditation. Please remember these four: journaling, reframing, cognitive distortions, and meditation. Problem focused coping strategies. Now, psychoanalytic theories propagate that different mechanisms are powerful coping strategies to deal with stress. Now we are coming to different strategies, right? So, different strategies, different mechanisms. Sigmund Freud has very, very clearly mentioned there are several different mechanisms which all of us use, but we do not know that we are using those. So that is a very powerful coping strategy. The most commonly used techniques are given below. Affiliation involves dealing with stress by befriending or finding social support. What does this mean? Means you speak to someone, you discuss it with someone, whether your friends, a very close friend, or family members, and then befriending means you talk to a friend, and then the stress will reduce by the support. You will have a clarity of your thinking also. Then you have humor, as we have told, as we have discussed, as I've discussed earlier. Sigmund Freud, as well, is a well-known psychoanalyst, advocated that humor is an excellent defensive strategy. Please remember, you can use it in your everyday life and you can save a lot of your problems by using this defense mechanism, which is humor. When one laughs during a tough situation, then one feels free of associated stress. Now, the individual highlights the comic aspects in a stressful situation. Laughter and humor creates a sense of relief of stress. Please take this in your mind, deep into your mind, deep into your stress, and start implementing in your daily lives also. Next is, of course, sublimation. This allows channeling of troublesome emotion to socially acceptable outlet. Now, you may ask, what is this sublimation? It means that socially acceptable. Now, suppose you're very angry with anyone, but then you say that you want to sublimate to some other thing which is socially accepted. So then you go to the gym, you have that, that punching bags. You know that? So then you punch the bag very hard for 5 minutes or so. Then your stress reduces. This is socially accepted. Why? Because you're not punching anyone else, right? You're punching the bag, and this is helping. Then you have positive reappraisal, which redirects thoughts to good things, leading to personal growth, displacement. Then you have individual positive reappraisal. Then suppose you move on to something positive you feel, then you watch a good movie, which is a positive substitute, and then you feel better. Then displacement, individual redirects emotional feelings from one situation to another, which is less stressful. Then you have this repression. Repression is not good, they say, is an attempt to suppress all thoughts and feeling of a stressor. Then, of course, moving on, you have reaction, formation, an attempt to remove unacceptable thoughts by replacing them with the exact opposite situation is reaction formation. Next, moving out, acting out. Individual takes maladaptive, counterproductive action in stressful situation. So these are all the different mechanisms of all of us can use, which we will have a long lasting and positive result. So let us move on quickly to okay. Let us move on quickly to solution focused coping strategies. There are times we can do nothing to change the situation, but often we find an opportunity to take action and actually change the circumstances. These types of solution focused coping strategies can be very effective for stress relief. Generally, a small change is all that is required to make huge shift in stress reaction. In situations, one can change can lead to other changes. So that change is created. Like example, there is a shift. What you do, then you get a result. Then again you study more. Then you get better result. Then again you go to higher plane. That is a chain reaction. Same way, you do some work in office, appreciated by your boss, you will feel nice, you do some more work, you add to that, and then the boss appreciates more, and then do some more, and that is how you raise on the ladder. Now, solution-based techniques are time management, which one feels overwhelmed by busy schedules, then conflict resolution. Thus, an individual may alternate between several of the coping strategies in order to cope with a stressful event. Effective coping strategies enable the individual to deal with stress, ensuring positive outcome and a sense of well-being. Indian perspective on coping. What is the Indian perspective of coping? Now, let me give you a brief view on. In the Western world, coping is seen as an ability to push through, to keep going at all costs, skipping meals, missing sleep, neglecting friends, and outdoor activities. Whatever it takes to meet the high expectation one sets for oneself. Whereas in our country, coping is like being really honest with one and those closest to us. It means saying no and being able to do what is close to one's heart without any forms. We need to rework our expectations for ourselves and our life, earning how much truly one can rather than being greedy for amassing wealth by unfair means to achieve a high stature in society. The most powerful resource we have at our disposal is ourselves. We often get enmeshed with the problems and forget to acknowledge our strengths. We need to invest and nurture in our character strengths like determination, grace, compassion, clarity of mind, and creativity. These strengths are helpful coping behavioral strategies which can impact brain structure and functions and keep us stress free. There are many well proven good practices of coping like yoga, meditation, and spirituality, which people use from all walks of life in our country. And I'm sure you all also must be using some or all of these. Now, how do you measure? Measuring coping. Measurement of coping can be divided into two areas, key areas, namely coping styles and coping strategies. Coping styles and coping strategies. That is how you measure coping. Measurement of coping is done. Coping styles refer to dispositions towards handling challenging situations or stressors. Generally, coping style may be consistent across different situations, while coping strategies may change. See, styles and strategies are different. You should understand that. The most pervasive debate in coping assessment centers around measurement of dispositional coping styles. Now, both measures situational coping or dispositional coping. These are two categories. Both measures have merits and limitations. That is, both measures have limits and merits, and they have limitations, merits and limitation. Now, COP, COPE inventory, what does this mean? COPE inventory was developed by Carver, Scissor, and Weintraub, is a measure of dispositional tendency to adopt particular coping styles. COP stand, what exactly COPE? It stands for coping orientation to problems experienced. Coping orientation to problems experienced. That is the full form of COPE. They developed to assess stable individual differences in coping. It was envisaged important to consider the personality characteristics that might predispose individuals towards a particular way of coping with stress. So it is a multi-dimensional inventory developed to assess the different coping strategies people use in response to stress. Now, briefly, COP inventory. What is the inventory? So this was developed, as I already told you, it was developed by Carver and adapted 1997. And this inventory consists of only 28 statements across two scales and is more focused on understanding the frequency with which people use different coping strategies in response to various stressors. Now, this to an adequate substitute for the full COP. Now, ways of coping questionnaire. Now, state coping measures. We have a state coping measures checklist, ways of coping checklist, that is WCC. This has been developed by Folkman and Lazarus, is a situational measure of coping strategies. You please go through all these checklists and these ways of coping questionnaire so that you have an understanding of how these are done, so that if you have these kind of questions in your question paper, you will be able to understand and write it properly. So with this, we come to the end of Block 2, Unit 6. Thank you very much for attending the class and wish you all the best for your exams. Thank you.